Okay, I suggest we kick this off. I can see that people still joining, and I see also some of our speakers for the panel are also probably going to join us in a little while. Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Center for the Study of Democracy, the CELDI network, and our formal host today from GTI Hungary. It is my pleasure to announce the start of this 3 years initiative that is so gracefully supported by the Regional Cooperation Program of Norway, so Norway grants and the EEA funds. We look forward to a very interesting discussion today. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We have a very interesting panel, including our keynote, Elena Pippidy. That's why we want to have everybody enjoy the conference. We want to have an opening panel of 1 hour sharp. That means we want to keep the opening remarks to 3 minutes, and then the interventions of the rest of the panel to 5 minutes, and the keynote to 10. So it will be very much appreciated if you keep to that timing. I will try to make this short and keep myself to 3 minutes. The idea of this initiative that we're starting today is to reinvigorate the anti-corruption drive in Southeast Europe, something that many of you will note is not easy. Although if we look back to the beginning of the century, when many of us actually started their work on anti-corruption, we've made a tremendous progress, but still challenges persist, and it's much more difficult now with new ideas of how to deal with that. At the same time, we have a global resurgence of focus on anti-corruption. You know, we have the new US administration focusing on anti-corruption and democracy. We have the European Commission introducing the all-encompassing rule of law mechanism that hopefully will provide the capacity and will within the EU to tackle corruption within member states, and of course rule of law backsliding that we've seen. This is all meant to improve the well-being of the citizens of the Union. And of course, we as civil society and public administration and other stakeholders will provide important ideas for that. With this 3 years initiative that we that we start today, kick off today, we hope to achieve 3 things. The first is we hope to allow cutting-edge research-driven instruments to be implemented, and that's where CSD and GTI will provide a lot of input. We've also benefited a lot from the work of Elena Pippidy in the past. She'll probably touch upon that. Secondly, we want to work in a public-private partnership. We want to try to build the connection between civil society and governments in the region, for which we welcome our partners from the Regional Anti-Corruption Initiative and the Regional Cooperation Council. And of course, we want to spread the good things that we did further beyond. That is why we hope that our partners from U4, from Norway, will also contribute to this global reach, and of course, bringing back best practice from this global reach. I will now turn to the other opening statements for a 3 minutes introduction. I've already taken 1 minute of that. And next, I turn to Mr. Frode Dahl Feldvali, who is the head of Funds and Horizontal Concerns Unit at the EEA and Norway grants. Frode, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to say a few words at today's opening conference. Representing the Brussels-based Secretariat of the EEA and Norway grants, I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to at least virtually visit some of the projects we are supporting. The EEA and Norway grants is the contribution of Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway to reduce economic and social disparities within the European Economic Area. It is also a way to strengthen ties with the European partner countries. While most of our funds are managed by our 15 EU member states benefiting from the grants, there are a couple of notable exceptions. One is our fund for civil society, the Active Citizens Fund, which is Sorry, I just need a little bit of water. Which is kept outside of the responsibility of public entities. Sorry. This is because we firmly believe in independent civil society, free to perform its dual role as a partner for government and a watchdog. The EA and Norway Grants Fund for Regional Cooperation is another example of a fund. Sorry, the EA and Norway Grants Fund for Regional Cooperation is another example of a fund which is not managed by our beneficiary states. And the reason for that is that Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway wanted to earmark funds for projects seeing beyond national borders, finding common European solutions to shared challenges. The challenges in these projects spans across a wide range of sectors, from Roma inclusion and empowerment to environment or correctional services. And while there are only a little handful of projects working on transparency, anti-corruption, and good governance, I want you to know that you are also a part of a wider family within the EA and Norway Grants. Good governance is both a basic principle of implementation, which guides all the activities under the grants. And it is a mandatory program area to be addressed by all programs in all programs where we operate. In several of the countries, we work closely together with the OECD to implement good governance programs that can help countries adhere to European standards and recommendations from monitoring reports. I find your projects particularly interesting because it kind of combines these two reasons why we do sometimes some funds outside of the remit of government support. It is partly on the watchdog and partnership aspect of civil society, and it's partly on the aspect of regional cooperation. You have put together a really interesting program for this opening conference today. I look very much forward to taking part in this, and I also very much look forward to following your project after today's conference. So welcome to the EA and Norway Grants family, and I look forward to taking part.
Thank you very much, Frode. We feel like that. We feel like being welcome, and it's a very sensitive topic, so we look forward, but also very important for the region. Combining EU and Western Balkan states. Just to note that we will have, after the introductory, so after the first panel, we'll have breakout sessions. The rules for how it will work today will be posted by my colleagues in the chat, so please follow that. Ask questions if you want in the chat, and then we'll ask the moderator to bring them up. Everybody today has access because it's a meeting, so please keep your cameras and mics muted if you're not speaking. These are the rules of engagement. We are recording and broadcasting this, so please take note of that. With that, I'd like to turn to our two regional public partners. First, it's my pleasure to welcome Desislava Gockova, who is from recently head of the Regional Anti-Corruption Initiative Secretariat, with whom we've worked a lot in the past, and we hope to continue working on anti-corruption in the region. Desislava.
Thank you, Ruslan. Good morning from Sarajevo. On behalf of the Regional Anti-Corruption Initiative, let me also welcome you to the opening conference of the Saudi Regional Project. It is my pleasure to join the opening remarks, and I would like to thank the organizers for this opportunity. RAI has long-standing and excellent cooperation with Saudi Network, and therefore we are very happy to take part in the implementation of this project as an expertise partner. Regional Anti-Corruption Initiative operates in 9 countries of Southeastern Europe And such composition gives us a unique comparative insight into the society's behavior when it comes to corruption activities, as well as anti-corruption policies. Despite of the significant efforts and resources invested in transparency and accountability, we will all agree that corruption remains a major threat to economic growth, sustainability, and security in the region. With this project and through fostering inclusive regional cooperation, I hope we would be able to close persisting anti-corruption policy implementation gaps across Southeastern Europe. On behalf of RAI, I would like to reconfirm our commitment and support to the implementation of the project and to CELDI network in our joint efforts to facilitate regional cooperation in anti-corruption field. It is of utmost importance that we keep the dialogue open and constructive between the governments, international organizations, and civil society. Lots of work is still ahead of us, but I believe that together we could bring the change we all strive for. RAI is looking at CELDI and its members for innovative, brave, and new ideas, and therefore I'm very much looking forward to the discussions today, and I hope to meet all of you in person soon. Thank you, Ruslan.
Thank you very much for RAI, and we look forward, of course, to the opportunity to meet in person. And now to the Regional Cooperation Council head of the political department, America Petanovic, who have been very supportive and will play a key role in the delivery of this initiative. Amer, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning to everyone. Can you hear me, Ruslan?
Perfectly well, yes, thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. It gives me a great pleasure, of course, to be here today to deliver this opening remark on behalf of the Regional Cooperation Council, one of the leading regional umbrella organization with a strong political mandate both in Southeast Europe and the Western Balkans. I'd like to start by thanking really colleagues from the Center for Study of Democracy for intensive work done in the past months. Also our esteemed project partners from EEA and Norway Grant Fund for Regional Cooperation for the attention towards supporting innovative anti-corruption and good governance solutions in Southeast Europe. I mean, we all know international investigative reports often depict our region as suffering from corruption at different levels of administration. We are well aware of that corruption at high level of political sphere needs to be tackled in clear and more consistent way, despite, of course, that there have been several important and successful reforms already undertaken by the governments in the region with the full support of the European Union. We cannot, however, disregard the fact that the corruption is also a developmental issue in our region. The fight against requires deep, continuous internal reforms and societal behavioral change, which is also very important. Furthermore, building up and strengthening regional cooperation among relevant governmental structures, judicials, police, authorities, media, civil society, citizens, and other state and non-state actors seem to be very important precondition. But also, if you allow me, perception of citizens is also an important segment to be taken into consideration. To that end, allow me just to share with you some corruption-related findings of the Balkan Barometer public opinion survey that we conduct every year among Western Balkan citizens, more than 6,000 respondents. So unfortunately, the corruption perception trend has gone unchanged since 2019, as healthcare and rule of law institutions remain to be considered the most corrupted, both in terms of vulnerability to bribes and general perception. 74% of respondents deem healthcare system as particularly corrupted, 76 as customs, 75 customs and 76 judiciaries. These together with political parties at 78, unfortunately, and parliaments at 71, are among top 5 categories that are perceived as the most corrupted in the region. Differences among individual economies of all these categories are also rather small, showing it to be a systematic problem in all societies. What makes the situation look rather more gloomy is the most 59% believe that corruption is not being fought successfully. Additional concern is a low level of perceived trust in meritocracy, where vast majority is convinced that connections rather than hard work guarantees success. So combine all this with very low trust in democratic institutions and a huge division of us versus them, which can be really detrimental for democracy. These sentiments may not be good news, but accurate reflection of reality is the first important step. And this is actually what we are trying to do and to achieve with this project. It's a wake-up call to action for the governments, but not only for the governments, but also for other societal stakeholders. In this context, I believe that strong benefit of this project is the solid cooperation that will be established by civil society and public sector anti-corruption organizations, closer cooperation among civil society organizations, but also policymakers, EU institutions, citizens, and businesses in Southeast Europe will provide them with a stronger network and expertise. All partners on this project seem to be ready for establishing sustainable, innovative practice and the public-private partnership that will increase the accountability. And to that end, I'd like to really reiterate once again RCC's readiness to fully continue supporting and partaking in this excellent effort. And of course, thank you very much for your attention. And I wish all of us very successful conference today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amer. Thanks so much to all the opening speeches to show displaying again and reiterating this support. And it's a challenging area and we look all forward to this cooperation. Now, it is my pleasure to turn the floor to our keynote speaker, Professor Elena Pippidy. She hardly needs an introduction, an anti-corruption activist, a great person and friend, a person of great integrity and also cutting-edge research activities recently. You've probably read or hopefully read all of her recent articles and of course all the work on anti-corruption. Elena, we very much look forward to your keynote speech, although we've kept it short, but we hope that we'll get an inspiration from there also from our panelists. Thank you so much for joining us today. The floor is yours, Elena.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to meet so many people whom I have not seen in a while. So greetings from Berlin to the nice Western Balkans anti-corruption community. What I want to do today in this introductory meeting is just to sort of try to inject some substance in the title of this conference, which I think it's an absolutely great title, looking back in order to understand the next decade, looking at the past 10 years in order to forecast what will happen in the Western Balkans. And I just want to introduce the instrument that we in fact developed, since we all seem to think alongside the same lines, which is unsurprising, seeing that we socialized ourselves in this anti-corruption environment on the periphery of Europe 10, 15 years ago. So we all think similarly. And yes, we need to be able to forecast what is next and to be able to adjust our policies to this future development, to the extent that, of course, development are caused by policies, because as we have seen in the past year, there are unforeseen developments which we still have to see if they're going to play negative or positive roles in governance. It may be that they prove more positive, sometimes a shake-up settles things in ways which open new opportunities. Now, returning to the forecast, the way that we sort of helping this, since we have so many requests, in particular from diplomats and governments who ask what is going to happen next? What is going to happen next in this country? Let's say, a country has a nice, something which looks like an anti-corruption revolution like Armenia. And then the question is, but where will this country go from the next day, right? And what we thought of doing is in creating a mechanism which would in fact allow us to forecast the next 10 years. And you can find this mechanism. I'm not going to open it from the sake of connection. I think it is better to keep hearing and seeing one another, but you can all do it on your computers. Just open www.againstcorruption.eu. And there's a big map there, okay? There's a big map there, and go to the Western Balkans, to whatever country is in your interest, because we do not forecast by regions, but we forecast by countries. So how did we do this? This is a pilot project, so I'm very keen to get anybody's feedback on againstcorruption.eu. There is a form for feedback there. We basically started from the fact that in gross lines, we know what determines control of corruption at the level of the society. We know there's a lot of research on this, not only ours, but that's a whole cottage of research from IMF, from the World Bank. So we really know the grand factors which determine control of corruption. So what did we do is that we looked for the past 10 years at the trend of these grand factors. Now, of course, I'll go through them immediately, but of course, if we only do this, I mean, if we only predict the future based on the past, something horribly path dependent will result, right? So basically, if you had a negative trend for the past 10 years, you're not going to be forecast to be positive. But we also know from our own histories that sometimes unforeseen developments occur. And many countries have taken a turn for the better due to external contingencies. Things happen. You know, my own country, which is Romania, would have never been a democracy. It didn't have any of the so-called preconditions for democracy, let alone a member of the European Union, had it not been for the general, its external context in the 90s. Right? So the fact that the entire region democratized, the fact that the Soviet Union unfroze at the time allowed Romania to start on its path. And it has considerable difficulties on its path, but still the context was favorable. Okay, well, we know the context today is not as favorable as it was, but in the same time for the Western Balkan, it is, because there is this overall mantle of European integration, and this offers the context. Right. So what is left for us to do is to try to imagine a little bit what else could happen. So first thing is first, we look at these factors, right? The 10 years trends and how did they play up on a country. Now, trends can be consistent and they can show that a country either improves or in fact backslides or in fact doesn't go anywhere much. But we want to do more than this. We want to forecast for contingencies. And we imagine where do these contingencies come from? And of course, they're mostly political. So we imagined a next step. The next step is qualitative. It's no longer based on data. And the next step will just look at what happened in this most recent political events in the country. Did the country had elections, and did these elections brought someone with a very strong anti-corruption message or committed really to shake the system, or actually the other way around, a strong populist or somebody who will take advantage of anti-corruption? So what is like the most recent political strong indication that the country will go this or that direction? And that's to this weight of our 10 years trend, we add a third weight. And the third weight is in fact related to civil society and to the aggregated demand for good governance in the country. Does this country really want things to change? Right? So an element which is anyway already included in our 10 years factors, we weighted here like a second time, and which is the number of enlightened citizens in the country. What are the number of citizens in this country who have an internet household connections and are associated through Facebook? And this is like the last phase, because this is a wonderful predictor of control of corruption. It basically explains 2/3 of control of corruptions in overall in global rankings. So if you travel along this 10 years trends plus most recent political contingency, which may play out but may not, maybe nothing, you know, spectacular happened in a country, plus what is the aggregate demand in this society? Is there a critical mass there asking for something? And this takes us to the forecast. Now, the 10-year elements here are derived from our index of public integrity, but they're not identical because we could not find all of them for 10 years. However, they stand for the same, and they should not be seen narrowly as proxies, but they should be simply understood as groups of factors. So there are factors which proxy, factors which create opportunities for corruption and which tend to measure power discretion, like the measurements that we all know very well from doing business of World Bank, or like fiscal transparency. And I think that here the region has been doing fairly well compared to other regions of the world. But also there is another strong indicator here. If you read my last Cambridge University Press book, Europe's Burden, you will see there that I was rather pessimistic about the Balkans and European integration because I noted that regulatory quality, instead of improving in these last 10 years, have been uniformly going down in all the countries. And you ask yourself why during the process of Europeanization, when you adopt so many good laws, or which should be laws on top of the world, regulatory quality, which is a World Bank indicator, goes down instead of up. And the answer you all know very well is that what results is not better legislation, but what results is a formal-informal gap, which is larger and larger and seems to create a serious implementation gap. So regulatory quality has not been positive for the past 10 years. And on the side of factors producing opportunities for corruption, we find quite limited progress. I think the region is still well ahead of even some EU member countries, such as Malta or Cyprus. And I don't think there is much progress to go there on the classic anti-corruption ways. But I think there's a lot of progress which could happen on the lines, for instance, of a previous CELDI analysis, the analysis on monopolies, on captured markets, on things like this. I think there a lot of work can still happen to reduce opportunities for corruption, because obviously a lot of legislation is still out there, which is basically legislation which encourages favoritism, and this is why favoritism happens. The second set of factors refers to the constraints that corruption encounters, the capacity of these societies to constrain the ruling elites not to spoil from public funds. And here we have the two major factors, the judicial independence and the freedom of the press. Now, freedom of the press has not been doing well in the past decade. I'm telling you, no surprise. It declined less than in the previous decade, but it still declined. Judicial independence is uneven from country to country. But in the end of the day, what has to be understood is that these two are purely political factors, and they depend a lot on the political equilibrium. So the main role that the European Union should play here is simply in preserving pluralism. The judiciary will become independent in a country if it's going to be a balance between political forces, so nobody is strong enough to control it. In other words, if you have, like in Albania, a vetting process where by de facto you empower only one political party to vet the judiciary, despite the virtue of the process, despite the fact that on paper this process looks very well, in fact you lose by the fact that that pluralism is seriously affected, and you may actually end up with a judiciary which is more partisan than it was before. Now, this
Elena, can I ask you to wrap up in
Please.
2 minutes, if
yeah,
possible?
absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
On freedom of the press, I think the news are not bad. So, the tendencies have not been positive, but on the other hand, there is still considerable free press in the Balkans. There is considerable alternative free press. And I think that the main policy efforts should be on really how to help have an alternative business model to captive media. This is now a problem which exists also in Western Europe. So here is, I think, where too little effort exists, because we are lost in our discussions about whistleblower protections and a lot of other nitty-gritty of anti-corruption, which in fact have very little impact, instead of looking at this major area of how can we do to empower media, because media works. Media remains the most powerful anti-corruption factor. So finally, when we wrap all this together, what we forecast, but this is from last year, from before the pandemic starts, so I'm really happy to look at it again. Michael Johnson and me, who were like the final panel for all these data evaluations and for all the input, we forecasted North Macedonia to progress, and we forecast Bosnia-Herzegovina to backslide. And for the rest of the countries, we very much forecast that they will evolve very little. So in other words, we don't see any major change in indicators to happen over the next years. I realize this is very challenging, and I'm really happy to discuss more in depth the methodology. There is a video tutorial on how we have done this on our website, againstcorruption.eu. And please use the feedback forms and tell us there. As you can see in this model, despite the fact that we rely on this 10 years data, in the same time, we do allow room for contingencies. So if we say something about a country that we forecasted that it's going to go better or it's going to be worse, this is in no way sentencing the country. We are really very happy to welcome new unexpected events which would in fact improve on our trends. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Elena. That's great. And of course, we hope to look also at the EU countries from Southeast Europe and to compare that. And I'll like now to turn to our panel, where we have also people from these countries that will discuss hopefully our progress in the future. I'm turning now to our partner from U4, David, for moderating the panel discussion. And I excuse myself that we've taken half an hour, but hope we could squeeze in our next discussions in the next 30 to 40 minutes. Thanks, David, for doing that feat. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ruslan, and thanks, Elena, as ever, really interesting view on the region. So my name's David Jackson. I work at U4, which is a partnership of 8 development agencies based on the west coast of Norway in Bergen. It's the U4 Anti-Corruption Resource Centre. We're delighted to be part of this project. We work in different regions of the world, but Southeast Europe has always been an important one for us. And thank you to Ruslan and his team and colleagues for organising this event. So the title of this panel is Addressing Challenges to Democracy and the Rule of Law in Europe and its regions. So I think what we want to do is continue what Elena has just done and to kind of set the scene a little bit for this project, to establish a perspective of where we are at and what we need to face up to. So we have 5 speakers to start off with, who are all situated differently, and so can provide some contrasting perspectives. I hope taken together we'll get a well-rounded view of the situation. But I think we should just go straight into it. So first up, we have the view from the European Commission, of course, a major partner for the project countries. And giving this perspective will be Giulio Veneri, who is head at the Center of Thematic Expertise at the Directorate General for Neighborhood and Enlargement Negotiations. So welcome, Giulio.
Thank you, David. Hope you can hear me well, indeed. Yes, great, thanks for nodding. It's a pleasure, as always, to give our contribution and our perspectives. And thank you again, Ruslan, for the invitation. As you know, I like to be a very diligent speaker, and in terms of following the wishes of the friends at CELDI. So what I'm going to do today, I'll try to answer the guiding questions that you circulated when you first sent the invitation. Of course, Elena has already answered some of those questions brilliantly, and I tend to agree with many points that have already been made. So you will understand. I will keep short. I will keep it short on some of those guiding questions, and will elaborate more on others from those that you have sent. First question that came our way from you, Ruslan, was whether the US and their drive for democracy and human rights can be of an inspiration for what we are trying to do in Southeast Europe, and whether or not we might strengthen the partnership and align ourselves to the work that the US has been doing. I think here that the dynamics and the geostrategic dynamics, in particular in Southeast Europe, are rapidly changing, and also that the United States, as a relevant actor, is projecting itself in different ways than it used to do some years ago. So for sure, our path and our engagement does not depend much on that of the United States. But I have an important reflection to make in this regard, and cast a little bit light on what is our ambition and most importantly, our constitutionally enshrined ambition. So allow me to make a boring reference to the treaty. I think, Ruslan, you said this in your introduction when you refer to the EU and its strategic ambition to entrench the rule of law in partner countries and so on and so forth. Well, that is indeed our mantra. So if I have to make a parallel with the United States, allow me to make reference to what the US used to say about themselves early in the last century when they were presenting themselves as the beacon of democracy. I think it was Roosevelt who used to say that. I think we maintain this constitutional ambition, as I said, because it's in the Lisbon Treaty, to be the beacon of the rule of the law. And this is something that is clearly stemming from the treaties. The rule of the game for us in the enlargement process and what Article 49 says are clear. We work against the backdrop of the values upon which the Union is founded, and the rule of the law is one of the core values. And this is also linked to our neighborhood policy, because if you go from Article 49 then to Article 8 of the treaty, where we design the way in which the special relationship with the neighbor has to be structured, well, also there we clarify that the aim is to build an area of prosperity and good neighbor relations with the South and with the East, but has to be founded on the value of the Union. So we are very normative in this, but I think it's a normative perspective of which we can be proud. So to answer the first question that came from your team, Ruslan, I think that we are trying to set our own trajectory with some normative views there, but I still find them very noble. And then when it comes to also what kind of investment that we have been doing, I think that we can be proud of many achievements. And in the past 10 years, if we look at anti-corruption only, but even more so if we broaden the statistics to police reform and work on the judiciary, including supporting very complex and comprehensive reform processes, I think the EU has invested quite a lot in the region, and it is reassuring to hear that somehow, I think Elena in between lines mentioned that in some countries, at least in terms of the design of the legislation, the institutional design, and the initial establishment of good practices, I think in the last years we achieved quite a lot. And I think Elena even mentioned that in comparative terms, there are possibly also some EU member states who have to catch up in terms of some legislative weaknesses compared to what has happened in the Western Balkans. So I feel that we have contributed to that quite a lot. So to answer,
thank you, Giulio. I'm going to ask you to wrap up, if that's okay. So we need to move on to the next speaker.
It was my wrap up.
Okay.
Because the second question was indeed from the team what we have achieved so far from a perspective.
Thanks. So. Yeah,
sorry, just to finish the sentence. Yeah. So indeed, I think that I want we remain committed, and we remain, I think, the major sponsor of this endeavor. And to conclude, I want to say that through better evidence-based assistance and assessment, we will possibly bring major breakthroughs in the region, but this will happen only if we manage to inject the change that is a societal change. So we need to work, again, as has been mentioned, on the civil society, with the civil society, on the press, with the press, and achieve more checks and balances. I concluded there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Giulio. Thank you for that optimistic and encouraging end. Okay, next up we have the view of those involved in implementing reform. So we have Tamara Misheda, who works at the Directorate for European Affairs, International and Judicial Cooperation at the Ministry of Justice and Public Administration in Croatia. So please, Tamara, welcome.
Yes, thank you. Congratulations and correctly spelling my name. Good morning, everyone. Once again, my name is Tamara Mišad, and I'm head of anti-corruption sector at Croatian Ministry of Justice and Public Administration. I would like to once again thank to the organizers for inviting me to participate at this opening conference event. The subject of corruption, as we have heard from previous speakers, or better say anti-corruption, is common point on agenda for the EU states in this part of Europe, but also for the neighboring countries. Therefore, the forum such as this one is a much welcome and needed opportunity for a concrete discussions and sharing of our successful and unsuccessful experiences. As you know, the EU has a focus on subjects of anti-corruption internally, but also externally. In context of the EU, there is an EU legislation in the area which, combined with the new rule of law mechanism of evaluation, makes a whole circle story of implementation and keeping track of the EU values in practice. On the other hand, the legislation, such as the recent directive on protection of whistleblowers, which is the new standard that is now obligatory not only for the EU member states, but it is also a standard which should be followed by the countries aspiring to become members of the EU. In each case, a closer focus on upholding the EU values like rule of law, human rights, transparency, integrity, etc., is an important factor in transforming society in whole, which is also reflected in the field of fight against corruption. In that light, I would like to mention that at the moment in Croatia, we are developing our new strategy for fight against corruption. This is the second one since we entered the EU. The first strategic documents were made prior to our accession to the EU, and our current work on a strategic framework is a reflection of Croatia's commitment to have a continuity and structure in our approach to fight against corruption. Having said that, and a piece of an answer to questions posed prior to this event, when asked, can the countries of the Southeast Europe deliver the reforms needed in this area, I personally believe that we shouldn't pose the question whether the countries are able to deliver the reforms, because I believe that the EU values must be implemented by those who will be bound by them. No one can do it instead of the people and the society who will be affected by these values. And by society, I don't mean just governments and NGOs and academia, etc., but I mean also general public who needs to formulate their requests over politics, not only through election process, but also using their citizens' rights to request transparency, to monitor integrity, to become aware that citizens are the ones who ultimately form the political agenda. So in that sense, I think that the question shouldn't be can those countries deliver the reforms, but how will they do it, and how can they strengthen the rights of the citizens and their knowledge on how to use them, how to utilize those rights.
Thank you, Tamara. Thanks, Tamara. Please, could you wrap up? Sorry to push you along. Yeah.
Okay. What I wanted to say, just allow me with this sentence.
Yep.
What I want to say is that we need more activities on how to, close to the people, the activities that we do, and what rights do we give to them, and possibilities how to, engage into a life of a state, to engage into a legislation process, to request access to information, etc. We plan some activities in the framework of our recovery and resilience plan in that sense, and I hope that the combination of these reforms that we plan in our RRP, combined with the legislation that we previously implemented, will give the outcome that we need from these reforms. So Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tamara. And what I took loud and clear from you is that, yes, we need to increase the demand for anti-corruption reforms. And this is what Elena mentioned as a kind of critical factor from her research. So thank you for conveying that very, very clearly. So now we move on to Trajko Trajkov, who is the mayor of a central district in Sofia municipality. I'm not going to attempt to name that district. Perhaps Mayor Trajkov can name it for us. He was previously the Minister of Economy, Energy and Tourism in Bulgaria. So welcome, Mayor Trajkov.
Yeah, thank you, David. The name of the district is Radets. This is the old name of Sofia. And I suspect Ruslan has invited me to speak to share a couple of thoughts. Of all the mayors and former ministers that he knows, is because maybe he thinks I can make a comparison between the corruption risks at the different layers of government. And I will do so. In my opinion, the central government corruption risks are associated with, they have a geopolitical dimension. In my opinion, this is very important because, if anything, geopolitical competition intensifies. The usual suspects have been joined by a new global power, which is also very active in the region of Southeastern Europe, and the way societies in the region react to this is, I think it will decide the future of the whole European Union. I enjoyed very much the keynote speech of Mrs. Pippidy and the recurring theme of aggregate demand for good governance, because, well, you know, the ancient people have noticed that the more corrupt the state, the more numerous the laws. But nevertheless, the solution for the way to reach good governance and reduce corruption risks boils down to procedures and a well-functioning judiciary. I think procedures, in terms of procedures, we're improving, taking into account developments like electronic public procurement, etc. In terms of judiciary, I think it depends very much on really on the aggregate demand for good governance and clean governance. And I have witnessed in my country, Bulgaria, how the attitude of societies has evolved in that direction, which makes me moderately optimistic. And I'll limit myself to that for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Trajkov. So I think you've raised a really important point, this geopolitical dimension. So it's not just the EU and member states and aspiring member states. There are other powers in the region, and this will affect certainly corruption at national levels. And then also, I think, really interesting to distinguish between the different challenges at different levels of government. So thank you for bringing that up, and also ending on with some slight optimism. That's good to hear. Next up, we have the view from a major partner of the region. So His Excellency Håkon Blankenborg, who is the ambassador of the Kingdom of Norway to the Republic of Croatia. So welcome, Ambassador.
Thank you so much. And let me start out by asking, what am I doing here? I'm representing a donor, and that's obvious. So as a donor, I would start by congratulating all partners and stakeholders to this ambitious program. Secondly, I do not represent an EU country, but a country in many respects more integrated than some of the members, at least some would say so. We are applying the same standards and the same legislation, especially when it comes to the internal market. And finally, Norway is listed as one of the target countries in the concept paper for this project, and we are not exactly a Southeast European country. Now, it should be said that we have a strong engagement in this part of Europe. We have two schemes. the EEA and Norway grants, which we have heard of earlier. And we have another one, which is tailor-made for the non-EU members in the so-called Western Balkans. I will not go deeper into the EEA or the schemes, just saying that both of them corresponds very much to the priorities of the European Union. And the EEA is also based on an agreement with the European Union. The other one, the second one, for the non-EU members, have the same priorities, but are strictly bilateral with the partner countries, also containing some regional programs in that part of it. So the priorities in both schemes are the same, irrespective of being tailor-made for member countries or non-member countries. And the focus is rule of law, fundamental rights, to put it short, good governance. So that's a point of departure. And there are several aspects of this program, which is launched today, that I would like to highlight, which I think is particularly relevant. One of them is the public-private partnership, or the bridge building, as Ruslan said in the beginning. Secondly, what I find really interesting is that you try to apply the same approach and the same mechanisms, irrespective of a member or candidate country or a potential candidate country. I think we should see more of this. And it could be interesting to have some views on if the rule of law mechanisms in the European Union could also be applied on the candidate or potential candidate countries. As many of the challenges are roughly the same on both sides, being member or non-member, potential candidate, the legal context might be different within the Union or among the candidate or potential candidate countries, but the challenges are more or less the same. We see that the rules of accountability vanish behind fog machines of manufactured destruction, eroding governance. And I think in addition to the very specific programs we have heard of earlier and initiatives you have heard of earlier, I think it's important to have this in mind, this more geopolitical aspect, what I call the fog machines of manufactured destructions, which are eroding governance. So in addition to the specific programs, we should focus on the more policy approach in our engagement on rule of law. And I think I will stop by focusing on this aspect.
Thank you, Ambassador Blankenberg, for emphasizing the common challenges that the region faces, then also raising this issue of, again, kind of the geopolitical dimension to developments here. We move on now to, I guess, the view from science, the view from research, and we have Mihai Fazekas, who is the director of the Government Transparency Institute based in Budapest in Hungary. Mihai, welcome.
Great, thanks a lot, David. And there have been a lot of great ideas raised before me, so I cannot add too much. Nevertheless, I want to focus on one question for this panel, which is about effectiveness and the EU's and external actors' effective role. And I want to raise two very simple points. One is on law versus behavior, and the other one is what is corruption versus anti-corruption, and what are we looking for here. So my first point, I want to borrow from the economic governance of the EU, and you might, like or dislike how the Eurozone is done, but if you think about what the Commission wants from countries who wish to join the EU, is it laws passed? Is it an existence of a central bank? Well, these things matter, right? But actually what we keep on talking about is actual behavior, the budget deficit, 3%, 2%, 5%. Then we keep on talking about another aspect of behavior, the accumulated debt. to GDP. So we really have hard targets, which are actually hard to achieve, and we know that these targets matter. And again, the evidence backing them up, whether it's 60% or 80%, that's another question. Nevertheless, these are targets which help the governance arrangement around the Eurozone to be taken seriously. And I think if we want to have anti-corruption being taken seriously, we should move from demanding certain laws to be passed. We should move on from demanding certain institutions to be set up, which then later on not appropriately staffed, and go for hard behavioral targets, which you can measure, which matter, which are hard for ruling elites, even if they are corrupt, even if they are clean. Now, if again, you go back for a second for the economic governance, the budget deficit is one number, but then there are a lot of details behind that. Is it municipal budget deficit? Is it central government, social security, state-owned enterprises, state banks, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of detail behind that. And I think this is, again, something crucial for the anti-corruption movement and aid effectiveness and the use effectiveness. We should set high-level targets and make sure that under those high-level targets, we pay attention to the detail. We look at sectoral targets, we look at targets for lawmaking, anti-corruption in public procurement, so on and so forth. And I think this is where this project comes in with fresh thinking, with useful ideas, because you want to develop practical tools, measurement instruments, and use them to drive policy change and track progress. And let me just give you two examples here. Not all of these are from the project, but nevertheless demonstrate my point. So if you look at OECD Sigma, which benchmarks quite a few of the countries we are talking about here, Sigma updated its measurement framework and brought in a lot of behavioral outcome type of indicators. And one thing they look at now is use of extraordinary, exceptional procedures for passing laws. And it's a very interesting thing, because if you look at the actual numbers, you have countries like Serbia, Turkey, 65%, 83% of laws respectively passed in exceptional procedures. Macedonia, 70%, Bosnia and Herzegovina, close to 60%. So we have a standard procedure, and actually the standard procedure is the exception. So it's very nice to have the nice laws for impact evaluation, consultation, so on and so forth, but then they are not used. If you look at another thing, number of bidders for procurement, everyone would agree that having 2-3 bidders for a public contract is a good thing from anti-corruption perspective, but also from a competitive perspective. Then, if you look at single bidding in Hungary, Romania, Albania, they all around 30-40%. Just one bid submitted for 30 to 40% of contracts awarded. That's behavior, and that matters. And these sorts of targets should be the center pieces of our anti-corruption governance, rather than looking at laws and institutions set up. And my final point, I'm ending here, David, is what is the absence of corruption? And I think it's very interesting to look at the title of Alena's research center. It's Anti-Corruption and State Building. The absence of corruption is not just lack of people who take bribes, but it's good governance, right? So good governance which delivers public services, which delivers for citizens and businesses. And again, I would like to link this back to my first point. If we select hard targets, behavioral targets, which we know underpin good government as well as anti-corruption, which underpin effective public service delivery, we couldn't be particularly wrong. I often get that single bidding is not a precise corruption risk indicator. It's true, it's not precise. But what if we get it wrong, and this is not an anti-corruption indicator, but rather a measure of effective competition and value for money in public procurement? I'm fine with that. If we pursue anti-corruption goals, which are good for service delivery as well as good for fighting corruption, we are, I think, in the right place. So we should strive to get to those indicators and drive our policy action with those benchmarks, which are hard, behavioral, and also relate to good government, not just anti-corruption. Thank you.
Thank you, Mihai. Thank you. And thank you for emphasizing anti-corruption as elite behavioral change. I think that is a really nice way to think about what we're all kind of trying to do, and then pointing out that, well, actually we can measure and we can encourage change if we get into the details. So I think these are important messages for the project. So thank you to the panelists for your interventions, and sorry if I had to impolitely cut you off, but we are running out of time. We would like to invite, though, Gianluca Bombarda, who is the director of the Fund for Youth Unemployment at the EEA and Norway grants, just to wrap up this panel. So please, Gianluca, the floor is yours for a quick wrap up.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, first of all, for being invited to this opportunity, to this so Ruslan and the Center for Study of Democracy. I will try to be as short as possible, considering that we are already at 10:31 and our coffee is almost ready. So no. What to say? I mean, I'm representing the fund. I'm the fund director for the 2 transnational program funded by the Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway through the EE and Norway grants. One is dealing with youth unemployment, or youth employment, as we wish to call it, in favoring youth, therefore employment. And the second one is the regional cooperation, which has been funding this project here. What to say? Once I was invited to have my little chat on this conference, the title was Anti-Corruption and Youth, a Forward Look, which is very much interesting. It cannot be settled in two or 3 minutes. It's very much important, because usually youth and corruption are 2 separated fields of interest. No, so that is one of the other key elements that we should take into consideration in this conference. Governance, good governance, politics, and whatsoever. Yes, but what about youth? We have been seeing greater movement in the whole of Europe as related to the climate change, the environment, but we did not see any of the youth activities, massive youth activity in anti-corruption. No, so that is a key point that should be taken into consideration, on my opinion. Youth, they are unaware victims, on my opinion, of the corruption. When the corruption is not only related to money and political war, the corruption is all over in a lot of other cases. We can spend various minutes in providing other examples and in providing other examples. But what to say? I would like to be short, and I know that the title of this project, R2G4P, so it was a very long title, but it's also something which is related with 9 beneficiary partners, 3 expertise partners. So the regional 2G good governance public-private partnership platform. I love much more the nickname which has been provided in the discussion point, no? Southeast Europe. Southeast Europe is also C. So if we go to the definition of C, it is to look at or to recognize with the eyes. And this is the message that we have to provide to our youth, in my opinion. Youth to catch, observe, perceive, notice, mark, identify, recognize, spot, and witness corruption. So this can be a very good message for the youth, and to have the youth in forward look, something which is important for them, because the youth is our future. They are our future. And if we take out, and if we do not move towards to interesting the youth to participate with us on those anti-corruption activities, I think we do a little mistake. I'm concluding here. I'm sorry, but no, I have to conclude now, and I wish a great continuation of the conference within the various groups later on. Thank you, David. Thank you, Rosa.
Thank you, Gianluca, for reminding us that the youth matter, the youth, or the younger generations are often the victims of corruption, and we should consider how to engage and include them within this project. So thank you for that important intervention. I'm going to pass over to Ruslan now. Thank you again to all the panelists, and he will explain what's going on next.
Thank you so much, David, and I have to apologize for cutting out people and for not having the time for discussion. It was really my fault in the opening, so I should have been more concise. But thank you so much for keeping the time. I suggest now we have a break for 10 minutes. I can see there are discussion points and questions that we will answer later on. But what will happen next is we would like to invite all of you to stay in this room. So just switch off your cameras and mics, and we'll have 10 minutes break. That means we will reconvene back in 10 minutes. And we will be separated in 3 groups where we will be discussing specific practical tools that we could move forward on in the next 3 years. And I hope to see everybody in these 3 discussion rooms. You will be distributed according to the preferences you've given at the registration. Again, thank you very much for our speakers, for the panelists, for the opening remarks, and to Elena for the keynote. And we look forward to continuing the discussion, including on civic education that we see from the Greek colleague being suggested to here, including Garrett's discussion about Montenegro and the question to Elena. I hope we could take this forward also bilaterally. But thank you so much for kicking this off. Please don't leave the room. Just switch off your camera and mics. Have a break for 10 minutes, and then we'll reconvene back here in 10 minutes time. And thanks for our moderator, David. Thank you so much. Lily, am I forgetting something, or this is all that I needed to share?
I think this is all.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. So don't leave. Don't push the leave button. Just stay with us, and we'll reconvene in 10 minutes time, and we'll go into the breakaway session. Thank you so much again. And now 10-minute coffee break. Just switch off your camera and mic. Thank you again.